Good evening. This is Amos Tarfa again, just doing a quick video to introduce you to the Can Science Explain Everything series. We'll be working on this series starting in June, and I have a form that I have attached to this particular video. So please, if you're interested in the topic of faith, science, and reason, feel free to join us in this study. This study will involve looking at a few books from different authors, and I'll share about those in a second. But the topic again from this video is, can science explain everything? And so we're going to look at the limits of science. We're going to look at the interaction of science and faith, the Christian faith specifically, and then we're going to encourage our young people and just anyone who's interested in science and faith discussions. I have a Google Forms link that allows you to pick what day of the week would work best for you if you were able to join us for this meeting. And I'll be sharing from several books, as I talked about already. Can Science Explain Everything? That's the first book that we're going through in June, the first part of June. And then we're going to actually study a book called Scientist of Faith. That's the second book we'll be looking at. And then there's a good book here called The Polkinghorne Reader. This is summarizing some of the work of a physicist, a mathematical physicist called John Polkinghorne. And he actually wrote one of the books, another book that we're looking at, called the Quantum Theory book. We're not going to use this one for the class. I think quantum theory is a little intense for even physicists, I would say. We all, my training is in medical physics and chemistry, and I will tell you that quantum theory is serious. But this is just a short introduction. This is more like the dessert for the class. So if you want to just read it for fun, you can. We will also look at, this is just a general mathematics history book. We're going to look at some mathematicians. I don't know if you know, but a lot of mathematicians in history, some of the big boys were actually, people of faith. So their science and their mathematics did not limit, their faith didn't influence their math and science to the point where they couldn't do math and science. As a matter of fact, their faith propelled them. People like Isaac Newton, Leonard Euler, and Blaise Pascal, we can go on and on. But today, as I introduce the class, I want to leave you with one thing to think about, because this is just a short introduction. Before I give you that, this is one of the other books we're going to use called, I just got this now in the mail, Belief in God in an Age of Science by John Polkinghorne. Also, as I mentioned earlier, same mathematical physicist. What I was going to say is that, have you ever thought about this, right? If we think about the theories, and I have a science book in front of me, we're going to be looking at chemistry, physics, biology, mathematics. As you look at all the different branches of science, of course, you know, math gives you a fundamental basis to do physics, and physics gives us a fundamental basis to do chemistry, and chemistry gives us a fundamental basis to do biology. There's a series of interactions. If you notice, when you go to college, chemistry majors sometimes will take physics 1 and 2. Biology majors will take chemistry, right? So there's this pattern. But physics majors don't technically have to do chemistry, and chemistry majors don't have to do biology. So there's a chain of interactions within these sciences. Of course, all of them have a role to play. But there's something I was thinking about yesterday. This is what I'll leave you with. And then please, again, if you're interested in getting our resources and materials on this topic, let us know. But have you thought about this? Let's think about this for a second. The laws of nature and the laws of science, when you think about chemistry and you think about physics, think about the fact that all these laws exist independent. Some of them exist independent of one another. They are such that they don't have to exist. So here's what I mean. If somebody says, I believe in Boyle's law with gases, if they believe in Boyle's law with gases exists independently of another law in biology, for example, and it exists independently of a law in physics. So if we're talking about a universe of design and an intentional creation of the universe, it makes sense because we see intelligibility in the universe. We see numbers making sense. I mean, sometimes I do math problems or solve problems in physics and this and that, and when they all work out, sometimes you almost want to cry of just how beautiful it flows. Mathematics and these principles flow. But what we need to understand about mathematics is that mathematics actually exists independently of the things that it explains. I repeat, mathematics explains certain principles independent of the things that you can later use to explain using the math. Here's what I mean. There's some formulas in math that work independently of any system that you can later use those formulas with. So math works pure mathematics sometimes, just the beauty of the mathematics. It doesn't need to be applied to any field of study. It's just beautiful in and of itself. So when you have intelligibility in numbers, in these formulas that work out beautifully in all these constants, it makes you go, okay, we have two options. All of this came by chance, or there was intentionality in design by how these things came to be. So if you say that the universe is designed, some of these formulas and equations make sense because they're coming from a perspective of one who intended them to be. Galileo, another person of faith, by the way, said that, again, mathematics is like the language of which science speaks, right? This is the language of science, right? Mathematics gives us the tools to do science properly. So I say this to say there's two options. Either these things came to be by chance, there's no order, no plan beforehand, or there's a design to the universe that we live. If there's a design to the universe, no problem. But if there's no design, here's my assignment for you, or for anyone who might be thinking about this, is that if you look at the laws in chemistry and the laws in physics and the laws in biology, you need to then define how each of those laws independently came to be. So now we take these probabilities of all these things that came to be from different reasons. And when you take all of that into perspective, my friends, you have a very high, it's very improbable. You have a very high, low chance of any of those things, of those things combined happening together. So you have a universe that came to be. You might use a law to explain that. And then you have to explain how in that universe cells behave. Well, the behavior of cells in a universe that came to be has to be explained independently from the universe coming to be. So now you have to explain the laws of the cells, you have to explain the laws of the chemicals, you have to explain the laws of the gases. My point is this, my friends, it's not very easy, right? Somebody wrote a book once and said, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Part of the purpose of that is to say it takes a lot of faith to believe that this universe exists independent of one who created the universe. The laws of science, and we're going to be looking at a lot of these laws of science and mathematics, of chemistry and physics and biology. These laws point us back more and more to the one who created it all. We can't look at the universe and say all these laws that are independent of one another somehow all came by chance. That takes a lot of faith, a lot more faith than we're even called to have. Christians are even, that's a lot of faith. But the strange thing is that's the very reason people will rather believe that all these things came together by chance is because they don't want to have faith, and in the process they end up having excess, a lot of faith, more faith than they even than is even required of those who believe and say that they have faith. I don't know if that all makes sense, but we'll be talking a lot about that, and I just find it interesting. Yesterday it dawned on me again that the law that I see working in a cell is an independent law that I see working in gas laws, for example. And therefore, if there's not a universal design discussion, you have to make a premise for every single one of those laws and why they actually work. Why do these laws work? Why do we have expectations of how the universe should work if the universe itself came by chance? That's a question that we should consider. Why should we expect these things to work? Well, I'll leave you with Newton's quote as I step aside tonight. Newton said, though these systems of the sun, the star, and the planets, though these systems might operate now, right? They might be working under the laws of gravity. They could not have at first derived their very position by those very laws. The laws that explain how these things work cannot be used to explain how these things came to be. Therefore, this system of the sun, stars, and solar system, I think he said, and I'm paraphrasing this end part, but basically says these must proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This is Sir Isaac Newton in the Principia, which is one of the greatest science/mathematics book ever written, and you can look it up free of charge now, right? We have Google. You can look up the Principia. It's amazing that one of the greatest physicists of all time and greatest mathematicians writes in the Principia and reminds us that though this system of the sun, the stars, and the solar system can be governed by a certain set of laws, we cannot use those laws to explain how these things came to be in the first place. Science can give explanations, but science cannot. For the most part, science does not deal with the origin of some of these explanations. It's just explaining that which has come and cannot necessarily tell us why it has come or how it got there. So please, if you want to join us, the first book we're reading is Can Science Explain Everything by John Lennox. And it's on the Kindle, it's on the Audible, there's a hard copy. If you need a copy, and let us know, and we can look to send you one too. So those are just some of the topics we're going to be discussing in the series. Can Science Explain Everything? Faith, reason, and science, and dissecting all the relationships and inner workings of faith, reason, and science. One analogy for you, and I do promise I'll step aside now, is when you think of your keyboard, you push Control A, which is highlight all. You push Control C, which allows you to basically copy all, and you push Control X if you want to cut, Control V if you want to paste. These things I'm saying are setups, of course, on a Microsoft computer. I don't use the Apple system, so I don't know that as much. But if you take these laws, notice they can explain how to interact with Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, and all of that. But I haven't answered the question, why does Control A work? And why does Control C do what it does? And why does Control P print? Notice that science can explain what happens when you push Control A and Control C. And sometimes science doesn't necessarily have the explanation, but that's the extent of the nature of science, which is one of the first topics we're going to be talking about. So science can explain what these things do, but science cannot then explain why and how they came to do some of these things. Some of that is not in the realm of science. And if you've taken a course called Epistemology, the nature of knowledge, how do you know what you know? And how do you know that what you know is knowable? And all of those kinds of discussions, you would notice that there are limits to certain types of knowledge. And science does not get into certain types of knowledge. So therefore, if we see the system operating with Control A, Control C, Control V, and all of that, it tells us that there are laws, but there are laws because there was one who designed a code behind the computer system to allow the laws to work. I would say the analogy can carry over, and again, I'm open to discussion, and we'll look forward to dissecting more of these issues later on as far as science and faith and reason, and encouraging us to see that God's handiwork can be seen in his creation, and that is part of why science works. Blaise Pascal wrote about this, Robert Boyle wrote about this, and a lot of scientists we're going to be studying. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. It's going to be one of the summers where I get to share some of my passions in learning science and mathematics and faith, and you can feel free to join in at any time. So thank you for listening tonight, and I look forward to having conversations and so on. So please feel free to look at the link on the Google Forms. If you would like to join us, feel free to join in. Thank you for your time, and have a wonderful day. Bye.